In 2020, a plot to kidnap a governor in Michigan, a plan to bomb a Black Lives Matter protest in Nevada, and a number of ambush-style attacks against police in California had one thing in common. Active duty or former military members are all facing charges connected to these cases and have pleaded not guilty.
People have been talking about the concern about white supremacists and militias, in the military for a long time.
Extremist groups target veterans and military members because they want that training that they have.
Evidence shows that the Capitol insurrectionists pulled tactics straight from military playbooks, and nearly 1 in 10 of the rioters arrested so far received military training. So just how deep do extremist ideologies bleed into our armed forces? And is the military doing anything about it?
I have covered the military for decades and decades in conflict zones and in the U.S. I started the day on January 6th just covering the Trump rally and President Trump speaking. I am right on Constitution Avenue. We've been here all morning. There are a number of veterans here. I was very near this group called the Oath Keepers, and they are the ones who clearly had some experience in the military. And this is very professional tactical gear. This is not somebody who went to the Army-Navy surplus store and found something. And the veteran said to me, no, I'm not going back in because I got my hip blown up in Iraq. I thought, okay, check, that's a veteran. And these aren't guys just playing dress up. I was surprised and I was appalled by the veteran present there. Appalled that someone who took an oath to support and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, would be there as an enemy to that oath.
Prosecutors have cited footage filmed by these veterans in filing charges against them. They have pleaded not guilty.
Overran the Capitol. We're in the Capitol, bro.
I think January 6th is not the end of anything. A full 12% of those who were arrested appear to have some background in the military, veterans. Now, I think that's a disproportionate number of those who might be extreme. But when you find extremists in positions of authority, in institutions that are geared toward protecting all Americans, that's where there's a disproportionate impact.
I think people have forgotten what that oath is. It is not an oath to a person. It is not an oath to a party. It is an oath to the Constitution.
A lot of veterans fall into this because they're vulnerable, like I once was. I ended up attempting suicide the night before what would have been my second deployment, and I was kicked out of the Army as a result. Instead of the military interpreting that as a symptom of PTSD, when I got out of the military, I went through a couple years of darkness. I know what it feels like to be angry and disillusioned, and that's what a lot of these veterans are feeling, and that's, for many of them, part of what led them down that terrible path that ended up in the insurrection on January 6th.
There's been a lot of emphasis put on true patriotism, kind of flipping the script on the American narrative and saying if you're a real American, you wouldn't stand for what we're seeing the government doing, right? So that's appealing to people's love of country, even though we know so many of the extremists are actually trying to undermine our democratic institutions.
For those veterans who've fallen into the rabbit hole, they don't see the extremism. They're taken down this extreme path, step by step by step by step. And all of these extremist organizations operate like cults do. They allow their recruits to believe that they're on a path of discovery, but it's deliberately laid out before them in a specific way to separate them from reality.
Since the Capitol insurrection, the Pentagon still hasn't released numbers for how many members are kicked out or disciplined every year due to extremism.
The military doesn't have a handle on this. The military has looked at this as a problem, but they can't even really tell you numbers. It is extremely complicated because there's First Amendment rights. What can you force somebody to do and not do? Can you join an extremist group and be part of the military?
This isn't about beliefs, and we're not trying to be the thought police or the belief police. This is about the kinds of conduct and behavior that certain extremist ideology can inspire and encourage and embolden inside the ranks. We are taking a fresh look at the kind of behavior and participation that extremists and extremist ideology inspires.
Currently prohibited extremist activities that would trigger disciplinary action include active participation in extremist groups, like fundraising, recruiting, leading, or demonstrating. But many in the military are calling for clear definitions of extremism.
We have a multiracial, multicultural, diverse America, and the military, when it represents that, is the best of America. However, this type of extremism, racism, white supremacy that is allowed to fester in the military happens because we allow it to. Because the military leadership many times feels just like I did as a young private, that what are we going to do about it? If we call it out, then this guy is just going to get a slap on the wrist and move on.
Naveed Shah is an Iraq war veteran and Muslim who experienced a wave of Islamophobia and hatred after speaking out against extremism following the Fort Hood shootings in 2009.
There was a lot of hate, a lot of people who came out and said that I was a plant, that I was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, or some other terrorist organization. And I felt like my family was even more in danger all of a sudden if they were able to find out where we lived. Getting on post if you're a soldier is pretty easy, and not every soldier agreed with our stance, and that was terrifying.
If confirmed, I will fight hard to stamp out sexual assault and to rid our ranks of racists and extremists, and to create a climate where everyone fit and willing has the opportunity to serve this country with dignity.
I think for Lloyd Austin, this is a priority. We have the first African American Secretary of Defense who has experienced racism. He has seen extremism in the U.S. military during his career. This matters to him. It matters a lot.
The American public has high expectations of its military, as it should. And the American public should know and understand that we're not afraid to take a look at ourselves. I really and truly believe that 99.9% of our servicemen and women believe in that oath. They embrace the values that we are focused on, and they're doing the right things. But I would just say that, small numbers in this case can have an outsized impact.
One of Secretary Austin's first orders was a department-wide stand-down, requiring every branch of the military to hold events, reminding officers of their oaths and examining extremism.
I think recent events and current events that we've seen in the media, especially in January of this year, have made it clear that this is an issue we need to address. A break from training where we discuss extremism in the ranks and how this threat can eat at the very fabric of what we do as a military and our cohesion as a unit. I would be lying if I said I am going to eradicate extremism in the ranks today. My goal today is at least to start the conversation, to have our junior officers think about these issues, think about how their ideology or their personal beliefs work within the system that we're in. There are some beliefs that are simply incompatible with military service. And to just give them the tools to identify and root this out before ideology becomes active participation in these groups.
If you espouse this ideology and you're willing to act on that ideology, then you can't by default be an honorable member of the American military. And we would have an obligation to make sure you can't continue that service. But again, it's not about getting inside your head, it's about evaluating your conduct and behavior.
The military's easy out would be just, try to identify all the white supremacists that they can and kick them out with bad paper discharges. And then you take away their economic opportunities, and you create a military record that looks like a criminal record, you're guaranteed that you're going to be creating the next Timothy McVeigh.
I think it's a recognition that the military, they have a role to play to assure that such a sacred institution is not turned into a place where extremists feel comfortable.
I think all of them are clamoring for some better, more specific guidance about what is extremism, what is extremist ideology, what should we be looking for, and what does active participation in extremist groups or extremist affiliations, what does that look like, what does that mean? And so one of the things that we're going to do is take that feedback, we're going to update the DoD instruction that covers extremism as a matter of definition.
The Pentagon's first changes in response to the stand-downs include commissioning an extremism study to better understand the scope of the issue, standardizing the screening process to solicit information about extremism, which potentially includes social media questions, and updating the active duty to civilian transition process to include provisions specifically around extremist recruitment.
As we get ready to make a veteran, as somebody begins to transition to civilian life after service, whether that service ends after 5 or 6 years, or in my case, like 29 years, that we are preparing them for what's on the other side. Because we know some extremists are actively trying to recruit veterans into their ranks.
Extremist groups and militias have been on the rise in the past decade, and they're explicit about wanting veterans to join their ranks.
They're trying to take these oaths and these reasons for people to join the military, to defend our country, and try to say, if you really want to defend our country, you're going to join us, because we're at the vanguard.
They recognize an opportunity to use our patriotism against us and use our desire for a better, healthier America against us. Frankly, we need to get wise to it. Or they're going to continue to try and drive Americans apart by targeting troops and vets.
We're never going to be perfect at identifying every single individual. You just can't look into the soul and the heart of an individual and know right away. But if you're a good leader and you're making it a part of who you are to know who your people are, you'll have a better chance, I think, at helping to identify where the warning signs are.
I remain optimistic in a very difficult time that the patriotism, the true patriotism of our armed forces will be one of those factors that helps push back against this hatred. But it starts with accountability.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.